Back for another FFPC main event, drafting out of the 10 spot. That's what we're talking about today on Stealing Bananas. I'm Ben Gretch. You can find my Stealing Signals newsletter at bengretch.substack.com. With me, as always, is Shawn Siegele. You can find all of his great work over at RotoViz. And if this is your first time listening to one of these, always like to mention you can check in over at YouTube on the RotoViz YouTube channel. Watch our beautiful faces, but more importantly, the draft board. We are underway already as we start this recording. We are back in the final third of the first round, Shawn. And the draft here starts very interestingly this morning. Christian McCaffrey, Jonathan Taylor, Justin Jefferson, no real surprises there. But then Austin Eckler, Dalvin Cook, Najee Harris. So running back room here. This happened to us very frequently last year where we were at 10 and just wishing we were at 8.
Because that would have been so perfect.
We were going to probably watch Cooper Kupp go off here at the 7th pick. Jamar Chase probably go off at the 8th pick. It is tough when you're sitting back at the 10 slot and you have to watch some guys you like fall to ranges where they don't typically get drafted.
Yeah, Kupp at 7, Chase at 8. But, I mean, that's one of the fun things about this. We get Travis Kelce at the 109. Ben, we are on the clock, and one of the things that might be fun for the show today would be to combine this with, I mean, we may do a separate episode or we may not, but a bold predictions main event where, I mean, if you're going to make a pick, then afterwards you have to justify it by explaining how this player is going to really do something.
That sounds fun. We do have 30 seconds on the clock, though, so we should probably think about our pick. I think we're thinking maybe Saquon Barkley here, right? That's for me, it would be Saquon or Swift at running back, and then you're in that other tier of receivers, Diggs, Lamb, Adams. I think it'd be real nice to grab Saquon here. What are you thinking?
Yeah, let's go with Barkley. I think that hopefully our guy Kyle Pitts will fall back around to us.
He's gone at the turn a few times. I drafted last night with Evan Silva, and we saw Pitts go off. We were hoping to get him at the 203 from the same 10 slot. Pitts went at the 1-2 turn to the 12 drafter. We got Andrews on the way back, which is a nice consolation prize, frankly. If Pitts is going to now go ahead of Andrews, it's okay to get some Andrews. We've been talking about that all offseason now. So exposed to Pitts and happy to be so, but a big part of that was just he goes at the 201. Man, we're all looking for who did this. And Andrews goes to the 202.
Well,
so maybe emphasizing how important these 3 tight ends were all offseason wasn't the smartest move for our bankroll. We probably should have just taken Pitts at 110 and then gotten DeAndre Swift on the way back, huh?
Well, I was going to say that was a possibility. I have Pitts ranked number 6 overall, so that would have made sense by my board. The only reason to not do that is just what you mentioned. We do have quite a bit of Pitts. All players, even if they're on the verge of an epic season, can get hurt. And so you have to have some outs from simple player injury. And then obviously you can be wrong. But we have 20 seconds wrapping back around. You had mentioned Swift as a possibility early. You had mentioned him as a possibility with Pitts. He is the kind of our top player here. Do you have any other
Swift or last? It would be Swift or Lamb, but yeah, I'm very comfortable going Barkley Swift and starting with a bit of a running back build here. That's a fun running back combination. Something when we compared our rankings in our 2023 first round, something we noticed is we both have them in the top 5. I think you have both Barkley and Swift in your top 5 as well, right? I think we have them in the same spot when I saw at 4 and 5 behind Eckler, which isn't really the way that the ADP shakes out necessarily. But I was certainly happy to see that we were on those the same way. So we get to start with 2 backs that, again, don't always go in the top 5 running backs. They have risen. We get them at RB6, RB7 that we have in the top 5. The drafters at the 11 and 12 turn started Adams, Andrews, and Diggs Pitts. A little bit more like our kinds of starts with a receiver and a tight end. But picking here at the end, I mean, getting 2 running backs that we think have big upside is definitely an exciting, possibility. We've talked all offseason about what to do from these back picks and how can you make up some points on the early drafters or not just give up a ton of points, maybe is another way of putting it. And we have talked about how the McCaffrey and Taylor top tier of running back, there's some fragility there that's probably not there with the top tier of receivers with the 3 guys, Jefferson, Kupp, and Chase. Of course, Kupp and Chase go 7 and 8 in this draft. But for us to match those drafters, Saquon and Swift are going to have to be basically as good as or better than McCaffrey or Taylor. Obviously, McCaffrey could get injured again. Taylor's receiving could not materialize in some of the rushing efficiency, the really high TD rate, really high rate of green zone touches, the explosive plays. Some of that stuff could regress for Taylor, even if he's still very, very good in a way that he's at, 20 points per game. Last year he was about 22 points per game. Barkley and Swift can get to that range for sure. You said hot take show or hot take prediction. I'll start with Barkley. How about that? I think my prediction would be that the Giants throw a lot. They are an aggressive team in terms of passing with intent on early downs. They're also trailing late. Their high pass rate helps them run more plays. Saquon Barkley's really strong target market share in any healthy games he's had basically in his whole career really manifests. He catches a lot of balls. He also has more explosiveness in the running game as the team is throwing to set up the run more to help with their deficiency on the offensive line, forcing teams to put more DBs on the field and then letting Barkley run against lighter boxes. And Barkley has like 1,500 rushing yards, another 800 receiving.
2,300 yards from scrimmage. I love it.
Yeah. 75 catches and 15 touchdowns. We got 17 games, Sean. 2,300 yards isn't that hard with the 17th game.
I know. I mean, now that you've got the 17th game, it's not even that bold of a prediction, is it? Not even that bold. We look at what he did as a rookie in 2018, and it was just absolutely absurd, right? He has 21.6, expected points per game, outperforms that by 2.5. I think that he can get up to that 23 expected point per game range that you're talking about there, outperform by 4. 27 points per game for Saquon Barkley this season. Are you, in terms of your bold prediction, not in terms of your actual projections, are you over or under 27 points per game?
I'd have to do some math, I think, real quick, but I'm probably in that range. I said, let's see, I'll do some quick math. We got 75 receptions, 2,300 yards is going to be 230 points there, 15 TDs, 90 points there. We're going to just add all this up. This is great radio. 395 points in terms just off those.
Oh, you need to bump it. We got to get to 400. If it's not a 400-point season, it's not.
Oh, I mean, he's going to have a few 2-point conversions that I didn't mention.
Okay,
right?
good.
Yeah, so
good.
The 3 2-point conversions will push him there, obviously. Over 17 games, that's only 23 points per game. Man, so it is hard to have 25, 26, 27 points per game. I only had 15 touchdowns, 75 catches. I think he could catch even more than 75. I think he could certainly get more than 15 TDs. I was doing more yardage because obviously the Giants offense maybe not going to be the highest scoring offense in the world. Where are you at on the Swift Bowl prediction with a couple picks till we get back on the clock? Do you want to do that, or do you want to wait till after we pick again here?
Let's wait, because it's going to be pretty bold. I want to start by saying that Swift, before he got hurt last season, was averaging 18.4 EP per game. So that's a lot more than drafters were expecting. Obviously, last year, it is a level that easily justifies him where he is going, but it also doesn't necessarily represent his complete and total upside. Then DJ Moore goes one pick ahead of us. We do have some more exposure. The names who have fallen through: Mike Williams, Jalen Waddle, Breece Hall, Gabriel Davis, Deontay Johnson.
I'm very comfortable anywhere here. I have Williams ranked the highest Waddle tends to slide, so I think I'd like to play him at 403 if we could try to get him there, and especially because Tyreek was getting a little buzz after the preseason games. Gabriel Davis I've seen go at the 3-4 turn in each of my last couple. Might not make it back to 403. If he's a guy you want, we might want to grab him there. I have Deontay Johnson in this tier as well. Don't think I want to take another running back. I think 2 of those 4 receivers is a really nice combination here at this turn. Darren Waller, another option as well.
Yeah, well, let's go with Mike Williams. He's somebody that we have argued for during the offseason. I think that we can make a bold prediction with him. I do hope that Gabriel Davis is the guy that comes back around. He doesn't. He goes in the very next pick. I was thinking that because one of the drafters already had Stephon Diggs, that it created at least a slight possibility that they wouldn't want to double up. I know we're seeing teams do some of that type of stuff, but it really doesn't give you the flexibility you need. I mean, you'd prefer for one of those 2 guys. I mean, you've got 3 weeks, right? 15 through 17. They could balance each other out there, but you'd really prefer one of them to go on a massive run that was similar to what Diggs did in 2020, to what Gabriel Davis did in the playoff game with the Chiefs last year. But Davis goes to the Devontae Adams, Mark Andrews drafter. That's an interesting start. One of the reasons why I felt like it was okay if we missed on Davis, even though he is one of the most fun players and does have that Thursday night game to start the season, you and I are very high on Waddle, who in some ways even works better right now. I think when you have an early draft slot and you're looking for a great value in the late 4th, we're also very high on Deontay Johnson, who is almost certainly going to be available to us with our next pick.
Yeah, I'm very comfortable with either of those. We got Waddle the other day from our early draft slot, all the way at the end of the 4th round. If you wanted to go Deontay here, I think that's a really fun pick at 402. Amon-Ra St. Brown goes. He, like Gabe Davis, has risen a lot in these over the last couple of days, week, maybe just week. I don't even know if it's a couple of weeks. It's more just the last week. But Davis and Amon-Ra now kind of becoming fixtures at this 3-4 turn, it feels like. Amon-Ra sometimes falls later into the 4th, but you're not getting him in the 5th anymore. That's for sure. Waddle, Deontay, I'm very comfortable going either way. I don't really love the idea of taking Darren Waller here with some of his injury stuff, but he's still another option. I think since we took Waddle with the last one, it might be fun to get a Deontay Johnson share here.
Yeah, so let's hit Deontay Johnson. Everything, I think, for him is going in the right direction. He's got George Pickens now to create some defensive attention in a different direction. He has Kenny Pickett emerging. This offense could actually be much more dynamic than it's been the last couple of years with Ben Roethlisberger. I'm currently writing a piece talking about Deontay Johnson and why he is a must draft for 2022. Ben, you've obviously been very much on him as one of the players you think is the most undervalued. One of the things that, again, just kind of jumped out to me playing with the Advanced Stat Explorer over at RotoViz is that Roethlisberger, in addition to the other things he struggled with, he was absolutely terrible in passing fantasy points over expectation last year. But the last 2 years, among just at the very bottom of the league with basically failing rookies as the only comparable high volume passers in terms of air conversion. And he was doing it while his target depths were minuscule. So not even, failing while he's throwing the ball down the field. Can't even throw any of the passes. We do know that failing rookies are in that same camp. So Kenny Pickett could just be more of the same, but I think that you have to be optimistic about the upside here. Before we get to the 2 wide receivers, Ben, I do want to give you my DeAndre Swift bold prediction. Swift, very dynamic in space, one of the NFL's best receiving backs. I think he becomes the new Austin Eckler this year. No one is Christian McCaffrey, but DeAndre Swift is one of the best pre-contact runners in football. We do have some concern about his ability to fight through tackles and create extra yardage in that capacity. But I think this is the season where he becomes just a slightly lesser version of Jamal Charles. In order to have that really elite yards per carry, you've got to be good before contact. And he's one of the few elite backs that really gives you that. He's not going to be running into the first guy. He creates a lot of big plays because of that. And then, if you're trying to create some post-contact yardage, It's easier where if you beat a guy, you break a tackle, you then have room to run, as opposed to some of these players who don't have the elite athletic ability to break a lot of tackles around the line of scrimmage. There are more defenders there, right? So you get these gaudy broken tackle numbers. And it's not that they're not going to have yards after contact, they are. But if you don't have the pre-contact numbers and then you're not a big play threat, a lot of those broken tackles can be at least a little bit empty. One of the other things that we do see is that the post-contact yardage tends to be very fully valued in fantasy. The pre-contact yardage, undervalued, right? So with DeAndre Swift, I mean, you're not talking about him being undervalued at the 1-2 turn where we take him, but someone who does have a little bit better fantasy profile, I think, than he's given credit for in some quarters. And I think this Lions offense is going to actually be a juggernaut in 2022.
I love that. So what's the bold prediction? He's going to have how many balls is he going to catch? It sounds like the rushing is what you're saying. He's going to have a very efficient rushing year, maybe run for more yards than he has over the last couple of years. That's going to be the big step forward for him.
He is. He's going to have that 2013 Jamal Charles campaign. The bold prediction is that weeks 15 through 17, one of those games, 4 touchdowns, just like Jamal Charles did in 2013, breaking multiple long runs, 50-yard run, 60-yard reception. Let's put it in week 16. So then we have the lead and we've got to be on pins and needles all week, waiting to see if we can hold on for the $1 million.
Shawn, you said 4 touchdowns. Jamal Charles, as you have to remember, since it led you to the overall championship, scored 5 touchdowns in that game.
It doesn't even seem possible, does it? Doesn't even seem possible. So
it was a 5 TD game. I think it was 4 receiving and 1 rushing, if I remember correctly, in that season.
I do remember that when he scored the second to last one, I looked over at someone from my family and said, I think we may be in the lead. So it wasn't.
Yeah, I did just pull it up. He had an 8 reception on 8 target, perfect catch rate, 195-yard, 4 touchdown receiving game, and then rushed for 20 yards and 1 touchdown on the ground.
Crazy.
You don't even need to run the ball when you can do what Jamal Charles can do in space. Almost 200 receiving yards and 4 TDs. Added 8 carries for 20 yards and 1 TD on the ground. I mean, it
sounds like you're making a case for Jared Goff as our Swift Goff stack that just wins the whole tournament.
I mean, based on your bold prediction, Jared Goff's going to be a star in Week 16. A couple updates on the draft before we start talking about some of our other picks. I mentioned the Eckler, Cook, Harris drafters in the 4, 5, 6. I was curious to see how running back heavy they might go. They all went running back again in the second round. Aaron Jones, Joe Mixon, Alvin Kamara. 2 of them switched back to receivers in the third. So the same thing we did, running back, receiver. That was part of the reason we didn't quite get DJ Moore to fall to us at 310. The third round, after the first 2 rounds were pretty running back heavy, the third round wound up being very receiver heavy before we were able to pick again at 310. Again, a draft you would have loved to be at the 108, for example. We could have got Chase. We could have got DJ Moore, later in the third. These things happen. Obviously, you got to take the draft spot you're given. But one of those drafters in the 6th spot has started with 4 straight running backs: Najee Harris, Aaron Jones, Nick Chubb, David Montgomery. For the way that we like to draft, we like to see those types of drafters, frankly, early. And they'd probably like to see, what we're going to do over the next several rounds with receivers. It certainly makes things a little more convenient. But
we had talked about in the previous draft that some of the most fun running backs were taken off the board there. I don't know that this one necessarily even helps us that much when you consider that none of those 4 backs, those are probably 4 of the backs that we would consider to be the worst values at their ADP. Now, again, Nick Chubb in the 3rd round, that's probably okay. He went in the middle of the 4th in our previous main event, but it's definitely a robust running back start with some broken tackles in there. David Montgomery, an interesting choice. It'll be interesting to see, Ben, how the Bears go off in this draft after they finally had a preseason game where they looked okay on offense.
I have not caught that one yet. So now that you say that, I'm excited to watch that one. I've only watched about half of preseason week 3 as we record this Sunday morning. Shawn, we're a few picks away. I want to take Deontay Johnson on the bold predictions. I mean, just because he's the easiest one. When you look at the targets last year, he was tied for second in the NFL with 169 with Devontae Adams. He only played 16 games. Justin Jefferson played 17, was just behind him with 167. Several other huge high-name receivers that played 17 games did not have as many targets as Deontay, who averaged more than 10 targets per game. I think it's pretty simple for the bold prediction for Deontay. He averages more than 10 targets a game again, which he can do, and he has shown he can do. The concerns about, him just being Big Ben's favorite target are not valid. He catches 110, maybe even 120 balls. And the efficiency, the yardage efficiency finally pops off a little bit. He was catching some more balls in preseason week 2. I haven't seen the week 3 game for the Steelers either. I'm not sure if he even played. But he was catching some more balls in that 11 to 15-yard range, I felt like, than he was last year from Big Ben. That was one of the reasons I was really encouraged by his preseason week 2. Had 2 balls called back by penalty, 2 receptions. Finished that game with 4 targets and 2 catches, but actually it was more like 6 targets and 4 catches. And all of the 4 catches were at least 11 yards. So a little more yardage efficiency gets him to 1,300, 1,400 yards. Last year he was at 1,161. And he also gets a nice touchdown boost to 12 from 8 last year. It's not even that big of a bump from what he did last year. It's just a little bit better. The QBs elevate the offense enough, as you already talked about, and suddenly Deontay looks like a top 5 receiver.
Yeah, I mean, his range of outcomes projection over in the RotoViz tools puts him just below that elite tier. And so you're getting him at a multiple round discount. Now, we're back up in round 5. I was going to ask you if you felt comfortable with Juju Smith-Schuster's knee, because he obviously has a lot of upside here in Kansas City, but he goes 1 pick ahead of us. Ben, the problem that I have with a late pick is actually not the 1-2 turn or the 3-4 turn, but the 5-6 turn. There's a pretty big tier break right after Juju. And so we're kind of sitting here now looking at Breece Hall, DK Metcalf, TJ Hawkinson, J.K. Dobbins. I mean,
Elijah Moore's still on the board. You don't want to play him.
He is. And we do frequently kind of play that through Garrett Wilson.
Yeah.
But I mean, Elijah Moore has just been one of these stars of training camp who doesn't get enough credit because he plays for the Jets.
So. I would be very comfortable with Metcalf as well. Or those running backs. If you want to go Breece Hall at 5'10", I mean, look, we're going to have 3 running backs, but he shouldn't be going at 5'10". Dameon Pierce already off the board. You can't convince me that Dameon Pierce should go ahead of Breece Hall.
No, the Pierce move is one that I think you've got to be excited about because it takes him up and out of the range that you'd have to consider him. And now if other drafters actually do hit on him, the degree to which they hit has really been minimized because the price is pretty provocative at that level. Doesn't mean he couldn't outperform around 5. I mean, if the Texans morph into a quality team and he scores a bunch of goal line touchdowns, always that possibility. One of the things that does happen here, we do take Hall, and Elijah Moore goes well above ADP at the turn. We're getting a little bit boxed out here, Ben, but that isn't a concern. We'll just keep drafting good players.
Yeah, it's funny. This has been a running back heavy draft, or at least in parts, and yet we are getting pushed toward the running back picks we like in terms of the subset of players we like. That is one of the things that will happen. DK Metcalf goes at the turn as well. He's the other one that I would have considered be a pretty good value at this point. And now you almost want to consider J.K. Dobbins from a pure value perspective. It might be time for your boy Hawkinson. We already made a bet on DeAndre Swift. It's sort of a bet against Amon-Ra St. Brown, but I do think there is some correlation between Swift and Hawkinson, where if the Lions are a little bit feisty, if Goff is good, as you've suggested, if they throw a little bit more, if they get into a high number of shootouts with a lot of pass volume, again, if something were to happen to Amon-Ra St. Brown, because that would probably immediately up the target share expectations for Swift and Hawkinson in those shorter areas of the field. I think Hawkinson makes a lot of sense on this team from a correlation, from an upside perspective. We don't have a tight end yet. You've been wanting to get him. So this would be the spot where I would see him making sense. What do you think?
Well, I was going to ask you about Dobbins. It would be an odd way for us to go, and I would definitely have preferred that we taken some different players early. But I just think he's such a massive value right here. I was kind of thinking that with Swift, it's a little bit of a bet against Hawkinson having a massive season.
Well, Drake London is like a receiver. I mean, we can go Dobbins. You want to go 4 receivers, running backs in the first 6 rounds? We always have one team like this. We're picking out of the 10 hole. Who cares? We're running back drafters now. Saquon Barkley, DeAndre Swift, Mike Williams, Deontay Johnson, Breece Hall, J.K. Dobbins. Again, in the FFPC format, it is 2 running backs, 2 receivers, 2 flexes. We're typically trying to win the flex at the receiver position. This is a roster where we're thinking in the shootout, these guys are all healthy. They're all putting up big numbers. We're probably flexing some running backs. We might not even be playing all 4 of these because when you do this...
Well, they're going to get hurt then. So
yeah, when you do a robust running back build like this, you're probably going to run into some problems. But say we have 3 really good players from these 4 and we're able to build out some other key spots. We have 2 good receivers. It does make me want to get an elite quarterback if we can in the late 7th. If we get a Kyler slide or something, because late round quarterback and late round tight end on this roster is gonna start to look real gross.
One of the
reasons, maybe we needed to just hammer some receiver depth and anyway, go ahead. What was that?
Well, one of the reasons that we don't need more wide receivers is that we have, as you mentioned, Deontay Johnson, who's going to finish at wide receiver 5, and Mike Williams, who's going to finish at wide receiver 6, averaging 23.2 points per game through 5 weeks last season, then gets hurt and is never quite the same. Also has to play injured as a decoy for a decent chunk of the season. That obviously knocks his numbers down. When you think about a player who's ready to really put it all together. Now, Mike Williams is much, much older than you're thinking in terms of a true breakout player, but I'm looking at guys who are going to take the next step in 2022. We take Mike Williams 3 picks after Michael Pittman. You can understand it, the Pittman thesis. You have to pay a lot for it, but I like Mike Williams with Justin Herbert, right? You have this situation here where we don't exactly see where all this volume for the Chargers receivers is going to come from. It's one of the reasons why we do like a lot of Gerald Everett late. It's one reason why I'm open to Joshua Palmer, even though there are a lot of red flags from a pure profile perspective. It's one of the reasons that Austin Eckler went number 4 overall here. You slide things just a little bit this way or a little bit that way. They just don't have the extra players to soak up the potential volume that exists in this Chargers offense. I mean, one of the reasons why Justin Herbert has gone at QB2 for a huge chunk of the season, and Ben, I mean, just you work through it, and it's almost impossible to justify Herbert above these rushing quarterbacks in Lamar Jackson, Kyler Murray, Trey Lance, Jalen Hurts, and yet the reason that people have this enthusiasm is that Justin Herbert could smash all of the records when you're, again, talking about a 17-game season. In passing this year, Mike Williams is the guy who has the monster ceiling. Now, all of these guys could do well. I mean, Austin Eckler could do well again. Keenan Allen could do well. We have a lot of hope for Everett. A lot of people have a lot of hope for Palmer. But the guy who, I mean, if somebody comes out and ends up being this year's Cooper Kupp from this team, and we've made the argument for Deontay Johnson, we've made the argument for, someone like Jerry Jeudy, who may be a little more similar in that regard. But I mean, Mike Williams absolutely destroying Keenan Allen in scoring, similar to what Kupp did to Woods last year. I mean, it's not the most likely thing, but it's very realistic.
Yeah, it's definitely in play. I like that potential outcome. I want to hear I kind of want to put the Breece Hall and J.K. Dobbins ones both back on you because I need to be convinced why all these running back picks made sense.
Well, I think that you've made the Breece Hall argument pretty compellingly in a lot of our recent shows. And one of the reasons why we still kind of like him, even as things have kind of taken a turn, at least a superficial turn for the worse for him. You think about Jonathan Taylor. Jonathan Taylor is better. He's a better prospect. He's even a little bit more athletic because Jonathan Taylor is just this freak of nature who is just better than everybody. It's the reason why he's a legitimate choice for the 101. It's not a clear choice, but he's a legitimate choice for the 101, even with someone like Christian McCaffrey existing in the league. Jonathan Taylor did not do a ton through the first 12 weeks of last season. And you don't necessarily want to be using a pick this high on a player that is kind of your projection for. But from weeks 13 through 17, he averaged 26.1 points per game as a rookie. We're looking to the fantasy playoffs. What types of players could give us those monster scores as we're trying to win the $1 million? I mean, that's when Breece Hall comes through and does it. I'm not, you don't necessarily, it's not going to necessarily be the same timing. It's not necessarily going to be the same degree, but another player that I think back to who was in this situation behind Chris Johnson, right? One of the best running backs for at least that small window in NFL history. And David Johnson comes out and has this massive performance. And David Johnson was not, really considered even in that same group of players. But I think that Breece Hall, again, we're talking about epic talent. I've made the case that J.K. Dobbins is Jamal Charles or Barry Sanders with Lamar Jackson. I think that J.K. Dobbins is going to make a push for 2,000 rushing yards.
I love that. Can you scroll the board down just a little bit for our YouTube listeners? David Johnson for Shawn, for anyone reminiscing on Sean's reference in week 15 of that rookie year that he did start behind Chris Johnson. He did not have more than 7 carries in any game until week 12, and he had 8 in that game, and then he had 22 in week 13. Several 3-carry games, 1-carry games. But in week 15, 29 carries, 187 yards, 3 touchdowns, 4 receptions, 42 yards receiving, 229 total yards, 3 TDs. He also scored in week 16 and had 88 receiving yards that week, had 92 rushing yards in week 14. So you got the 14, 15, 16 playoff stretch where he put up monster numbers, as you referenced. That's sort of what we're looking for. Even if Breece Hall has a really tough, first 8 weeks, and I think he'll play more than that. But even if he has a tough first 8 weeks, 10 weeks, like you said, Jonathan Taylor had. Now I actually like this roster quite a bit more, actually. I mean, Dobbins, we need to get healthy early on, but these are guys, I see what you're saying here with Hall, where we don't actually necessarily need to play him early. If we play this right, we're playing Barkley Swift, and we have Hall in our back pocket, essentially, for later. We're making a bet that he's going to do that in the playoffs. We got to get there. And so to get there, we have Barkley and Swift, and hopefully Dobbins pretty quickly, maybe not in week 1 for Dobbins. So that's exciting. We are almost back up on the clock. Jalen Hurts, Lamar Jackson, Kyler Murray all do go. Herbert, Mahomes, and Allen had gone in the last round. We also see several more running backs in these rounds. DeAndre Hopkins here finally goes at the 7:08 as the first receiver of the 7th round. There were only 4 receivers in the whole 6th round. Pretty uncommon, I would say, from what I've been seeing, to see this 6th and 7th round be so receiver light. It's created some real opportunity for us in a build where we went 4 running backs early. We have Drake London on the board. We don't have Pitts on this roster. I love taking him here. Devonta Smith, Brandon Aiyuk as other options. London goes 1 pick before us. Speak of the devil. I should have kept my mouth shut there. What do you think?
The team in 9 now has taken DJ Moore, Juju Smith-Schuster, Drake London in the pick ahead of us in those 3 rounds.
Yeah.
They are vacuuming up the value. I was looking at London. Brandon Aiyuk, pretty interesting here. We love Devontae Smith. Do you have a QB that you think we need to take?
I like
Aiyuk.
Push? I mean, so Herbert's already gone behind us. I like Aiyuk, and then the hope that Lance swings back to 803, or at least that's an option that we could stack Aiyuk with Lance if we want to go that route. If Smith makes it back, we might decide we want a 4th receiver too, and not to take Lance in this draft. But Aiyuk gives us that way of playing it, or we could potentially get a little stack here if we do decide to go Lance with one of the drafters behind us having already taken Herbert. I think Devonta Smith tends to go later than Aiyuk too, right? So even if we wanted to take both, Aiyuk would make more sense from an ADP perspective. I think I do have Devonta Smith ranked one spot ahead of Aiyuk, but those would be like, for the listeners, my thoughts on why I would take Aiyuk over Devonta Smith here at the 10 spot with 2 drafters behind us. And again, one already has a quarterback. There's this potential for a stack. And you're looking at ADP. I think we have 2 ways to play this 803 now, Lance or Devonta Smith. Is that how you're seeing it?
It is. And just to emphasize kind of the contrast in the drafts, Aiyuk went at the 512 in our first main event. It was Aiyuk London at the 512, 601. We took Devonta Smith at the 610. We're in position to possibly get him at a much better value here. I mean, I would have loved to have had AJ Brown in our previous draft if we end up being able to get Devonta Smith here, because I do like playing both of those guys and having a little bit of that flexibility to play both of them. But the great thing about Smith is just that, he comes in this range where every once in a while you do need wide receivers, and our particular team definitely needs them. It's tough because I do think there's so much upside with Lance, so much upside with Joe Burrow. I mean,
yeah, I like what you're saying though. You're thinking this is a roster with how much running back we've done. We have work to do at receiver. If they both make it back to us, that we should be taking Devonta Smith and making this a team that we're going to push Lance a little bit. Again, part of that for both of us is probably that element that we already talked about, where we just have a lot of exposure already. And we talked about with Kyle Pitts, we already have a lot of exposure to Trey Lance, so we don't have to have him as our quarterback on every team. This is a roster that needs another receiver. We are back up. They both make it. Sounds like you're leaning Devonta. I would be right there with you if that is the case.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's so hard to pass on him because
he's the last of a tier for me, and then you're into the rookies. You're into, Chris Olave already went, but you're into Sky, Garrett Wilson, Traylon Burks. So we might all, be looking at in the 9-10 range, but Devonta is the best receiver here from a profile perspective.
Yeah, so let's grab him. There, especially in a managed format like this, there are some things we can do to maximize our QB scoring. And so if we're going to pass, I like to have it, be in this format with this team. We're now up to Mike Williams, Deontay Johnson, Brandon Aiyuk, Devonta Smith. And suddenly that group actually is pretty fun. Still plenty of work to do, but
we wind up with, we certainly wind up with more depth than that. But when we start with an early tight end, when we hit a quarterback, before Lance goes, we often haven't taken 2 running backs, but a lot of times we wind up with 4 receivers that look like this. Maybe there's a 5th in there. It's not far off from a receiver perspective. We have had, obviously, 4 running back picks already, and we kind of think of those as detours. 4 detours already through 8. Typically probably want at least 5 receivers through 8, maybe even 6, if we can really get the receivers we want. It's probably my preference. I don't want to say ours, but I think probably ours also. But this is, a way to get back into position at receiver where we're still going to be looking at the 9-10 turn, particularly if we can get a shot at a Traylon Burks or Garrett Wilson. And Burks did catch a TD in the preseason game. I saw him go higher as a result last night than I anticipated.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but he did score some touchdowns at Arkansas.
Yeah, despite all the bad news and press all offseason, it is possible for him to score NFL touchdowns. So apparently people needed to see that, and they're buying back in. Hope you liked the Traylon Burks discount while it lasted. But if he goes, it still opens up. George Pickens has been going higher than him. Pickens is a fun pick, too, that we've talked about. We've already taken Deontay on this team, so maybe that's a tough one. Dobbs has gotten up there. Dobbs. I still call him Dubs. Not sure if he's the guy that we would love. Joe Burrow goes. No Lance yet. There are only 3 teams on this side of the board all the way back around to us at 9-10 that have yet to take a QB. This one here in the 2 slot does have George Kittle. I would expect to see Trey Lance go either here at 8-11 or at probably more likely at 9-02. with the drafter in the 1 slot having already hit quarterback. Seems likely that he'll wait and take that one on the way back. The Deebo Samuel drafter does already have a quarterback in Josh Allen. The drafter in the 8 slot has Elijah Mitchell, has already taken a 49er. Derrick Henry, A.J. Dillon, Elijah Mitchell, Darren Waller, and Zach Ertz. Seems kind of like a value drafter. Jamar Chase, Cortland Sutton, and Hopkins at receiver. I would suggest they need to get more receivers. They may think getting some value on Trey Lance is a good move if Lance makes it back there. Not likely that Lance makes it back, but I'm trying to talk myself into us potentially having him there for us at the 9-10, which would be pretty fantastic after Burrow went there. Where would you be at on Russell Wilson, who offers some interesting ways to play later?
Oh, you're wanting to get some Albert O and some KJ Hamler onto this team.
Right. I'm feeling like we add those 2 guys late and we have Wilson in this range. Now we got a stew going.
Well, I was going to propose a little Cole Kmet with some Justin Fields. The other quarterback that I do have too much exposure to is Justin Fields. And every time that he plays decently, I think that combination of rushing and garbage time becomes pretty tantalizing. But I've got to make the quick, bold prediction for Brandon Aiyuk. And in some ways, I mean, obviously, we're trying to give good information here. It's a reminder that Brandon Aiyuk averaged 15.4 fantasy points per game as a rookie from week 11 on last year when he really had sort of solidified himself again. They kind of changed the role for Deebo Samuel. You can go into the Stealing Signals tool, which pulls from Sports Info Solutions. It's modeled after the fantastic work that Ben does on the newsletter. Make sure you get signed up for that. If you've been missing Ben's newsletter over the last couple of weeks, you are going to be losing in your drafts this next week. Brandon Aiyuk, week 11 on 90% route percentage, 21% targets per route above Deebo, 2.48 yards per route run. Again, just ahead of Deebo. I mean, Brandon Aiyuk is a star. He's been, really generating more excitement in training camp even than guys like Allen Robinson and Michael Pittman. The only reason we get him is because obviously drafters understand that trio of star receivers there in a run-based offense could be tricky. I still like having the talent. I think one of the other 2 guys misses some key time in Brandon Aiyuk for a key stretch, not the whole season, but averages 19 fantasy points per game.
And I was going to say you should do Devonta because I think that's a negative AJ Brown take, and you're such a big Deebo fan. I should take the Aiyuk take, but the Aiyuk take for me would basically be that what you just described, but that he justifies why he was going so many rounds ahead of Deebo last year. There was a reason for that. He had a very good rookie year. Obviously had some off-field work ethic issues that people were concerned, or that the team was concerned about. But like you said, came on late, still some and getting nothing but glowing off-field stuff from the team this year, as well as looking great on the field. Sean, all that talk I had about Trey Lance, he did not go to the drafter in the 2 slot. The drafter in the 6 slot, who did not have a quarterback, also did not take him. We're getting a big tight end run here. Mike Gesicki, Hunter Henry have gone off the board. You mentioned you were thinking about taking Cole Kmet. He kind of kicked this tight end run off at the 901. Dawson Knox, Pat Freiermuth also went. Tom Brady goes to the drafter at 8 as his first quarterback. He was the one I was worried about as a potential value drafter scooping up Trey Lance's fall.
Well, it's going to be the drafter right ahead of us who has taken our guy every time because he's doing a very good job with this draft.
And he has Patrick Mahomes already. Also has 6 receivers. Has the Mahomes, Kelsey. But he's going very 0 RB. No running backs yet. Might not need to pull out here at the 909. I'm with you. Oh, he did take a running back in James Cook. And Sean, Trey Lance, who we were debating taking at 803, comes all the way back to 910.
So now do you have the guts to pass on him again?
No.
Okay.
What do you want to do? You want to go?
Well, we've got
Moore still
Sky and Pickens and Burks and Moore and Garrett Wilson, Romeo, and we need receivers. But Trey Lance, we already have Brandon Aiyuk. This is falling perfectly. This is why we
can't look a gift horse in the mouth.
So much fun.
Yeah, you can't.
We did this actually last year with Joe Burrow, where we made a ridiculous running back pick late, trying to push him just like 2 more slots. and then didn't select him on a Jamar Chase team, and that cost us.
Yeah.
We're going to take Trey Lance right here, and
Agreed.
You're starting to count your $500,000, I think.
I'm getting pretty excited about Lance at 9-10. I mean, the all the early running back stuff we did to be able to get the 4 receivers we did and still get Lance, who we talked. I mean, Shawn, you said multiple times, Hurts or Lance is going to be the QB1, one of these guys. And I don't think that's nearly as bold as it might appear to some people. Yeah, I think I was very much getting excited about this being a Justin Fields team after you had started talking about that. We got to have at least one Fields team this year. This felt like it would be the fit. I was also liking that idea of potentially playing Russell Wilson, but you don't plan to have Trey Lance available for you at 9-10. He's been going in the 7th round quite a bit lately. We got him as the QB9. I can hardly contain my excitement. Russell Wilson goes to the drafter in the 12 slot. He was another drafter who did not yet have a QB. That was why I didn't want to let him slide, is because both the drafters behind us weren't already checking that QB box. And that isn't a stack or anything. It looks like they were just taking a QB to get a QB at this point. There's no Bronco on that roster. So I think Lance probably would have went. I'm glad we grabbed him.
Yeah, and so now we're looking at the possibility of having to make a tough choice between 3, 4, 5 guys that we like here, probably none of whom will come back.
Yeah.
And Sky Moore, George Pickens, Treylon Burks, Rondale Moore, and Garrett Wilson.
One of the things we're finding that in this draft that is really nice is that this tier of young receivers has not been hit hard by this group. George Pickens does go at the turn, and then another running back pick. We're back on the clock. Sky Moore is still there. Garrett Wilson, Treylon Burks, Rondale Moore, as you mentioned. I have Sky Moore ranked the highest, but I mean, you could talk me into a lot of paths here. We don't have a chief on our roster yet.
And it might make sense to get some exposure. You watch some of the playoff games, and he's been open. They haven't exactly been on the same page. He hasn't had the volume that drafters are really looking for, which is how he's made it to this spot. Justin Watson has, looked more dynamic. Obviously, they've got potentially 3 guys in front of him. He could be a non-playable asset in the first 2 to 3 weeks of the season, but we do have 4 other guys. And so if we're looking at the overall wide receiver upside, you pick Sky Moore or Treylon Burks.
I'm going to take Moore. I think there's a chance Burks comes all the way back in this room. We're not seeing Moore go at 10:03. It's not likely that Burks will come back either, but it's interesting. I was talking about how light the 6th and 7th round were at receiver. The 8th round, there were 7 receivers. We took Devonta Smith. The others were Hunter Renfrow, Amari Cooper, Chase Claypool, Robert Woods, Tyler Lockett, and Kadarius Toney at the very end of that round. So you see that type of receiver that was being drafted. And then the 9th round, no receivers taken in the entire 9th round. A lot of tight ends. I mentioned that run. It's been a very interesting draft through this point. This would be, if there's a room where Burks continues to slide, this would be the room.
Yeah, and I guess I would be optimistic too that there's a Garrett Wilson possibility of getting all the way back through to us. And since we did not take Elijah Moore, then it just becomes even more appetizing to think that maybe he could be the guy. Right now, again, I have the FFPC combination of mains and football guys tournaments up over just the last, I believe, 4 days. A lot of drafts in there. We're keeping it to a limited window because obviously ADP on certain individual players can change quite a bit in this time. Garrett Wilson is going at the 11:02, Romeo Doubs at the 11:03, Jahan Dotson 11:06. I mean, those guys seem like they could come back. Somebody else who is vaguely interesting with where some of the other Tampa Bay receivers are injury-wise, Julio Jones is going 11-12. I mean, I don't know that there should be as big a gap between Antonio Brown's late like draft season ADP in 2021, even though before he got hurt and then had the other issues late, he was definitely justifying that ADP. I don't know that we should have such a big gap between where he was going and where Julio is going right now. Tom Brady is speaking glowingly about it.
We see, yeah, I would be fine with that. We see Marcus Valdes-Scantling and Tyler Boyd both go off here in the 10th, as well as Rondell Moore, one of the ones we were targeting. But again, this idea that these drafters we're in a room that doesn't like to target the players we like is, I think, pretty clear. And that's exciting, obviously, for us. Those are guys that are going off before Garrett Wilson and Treylon Burks. You don't typically see that, even though we do like Tyler Boyd, obviously. He's not a guy that we would take before Garrett Wilson and Treylon Burks. Ken Walker finally goes. He's another one I was going to emphasize. Rachaad White has not gone, even though Melvin Gordon has gone and Damian here. Okay, Ken Walker and Rachaad White both go at the turn. So at the turn, we have a drafter that is at least vaguely on some of these players, and Garrett Wilson goes right behind that. But the youth players at every position here are not being targeted. The Trey Lance, even at QB example, Burrow and Brady go ahead. I think we're seeing a lot of drafters in this room that are the types that want to know what they are getting in a player, as opposed to trying to draft the player before we see what they are and hit on that breakout. That's, again, obviously sort of our whole philosophy. So you see this across all of the positions, in my opinion, right now. And it's pretty exciting in terms of what types of values might come around.
Definitely. And the drafter out of one is actually somebody who's in a lot of the RV Triflex dynasty leagues with me and have pretty good rapport there, send some trade offers back and forth. I think that he and Pat Corrine and I exchanged quite a few trade offers in a startup recently. He's got at least a somewhat similar mindset, is, not necessarily following our drafts, but is listening to some of the content. He's very good at fantasy. You always like it when that type of player is as far away from you in the draft as possible. Not as much of an impact when he's at 1 and we're at 10. Ben, did you finish your Devontae Smith bold prediction?
I don't even know if I started it. Your bold prediction has been that he's their number one, that he has such a breakout that he's the better producer than AJ Brown this year. I can't even say it. I feel.
Well, let me run this by you. It seems like in 2019, Devontae Smith was better than Jerry Jeudy and Jalen Waddle at Alabama. 2020, he becomes the first wide receiver in forever to win the Heisman Trophy. 2021, he's drafted in the top 10 picks and then goes out and gains 900 plus receiving yards for one of the most run-heavy teams in football. And now he's going in the 7th round. So that's kind of the trajectory. 7th round seems, again.
Treylon Burks did go, but yeah, continue.
So we lose Burks. Romeo is still here. The player, I don't even want to say it, Ben. The player I'm kind of looking at, it was amusing in some ways that Albert O plays a lot of the second preseason game and then sits in the 3rd preseason game.
And Dubs went as well. So, yeah, the other guy in the tier for me at tight end is Gerald Everett, who you really like. You're thinking... I am very in on Alberto at this point. There's a lot of concern about him playing into the 4th quarter. There's been a lot of people talking about how that's a bad sign. He played in every quarter. He got a target in all 4 quarters. The one catch he had and one target he had in the 4th quarter was literally the first play of the 4th quarter. I didn't watch every snap, but I don't think he was playing deep into the 4th quarter or anything. He was in on a drive that, end of the 3rd quarter. He caught a pass in the first play of the 4th. It was a great play. People are taking that as a negative. I'm very in on getting our first tight end here with an athlete like him, with Tim Patrick out and what he could then fill in this offense. They were throwing to him on the edge. The play I'm saying was a great play. It was a one-on-one jump ball. He kind of got up over a DB. He had another play where the pass sort of led him out of bounds out of the side of the end zone, but it was an over-the-shoulder catch he brought in the end zone, 25 yards downfield. I like Alberto a lot at this point, especially as drafters have soured. It's a fun one.
Well, and you talk about Alberto and all that athleticism, and you can go to the RotoViz Combine Explorer and see it. You can watch them play. Noah Fant is one of the best tight ends in all of football. He's somebody I hope we get later. And yet when Alberto would go in last year, there was a discernible difference in the level of, we got to throw the hip fluidity, phrase in there, in the level of athleticism from going from Noah Fant, one of the best and most athletic tight ends in the NFL, to Alberto. He's just someone who hasn't played that much, right? And so a team is trying to get him in there, and comfortable with what they want to do. The other big part of the thesis here is that Greg Dulcich, who the team and a lot of super smart people like our buddy Pat are just, over the moon for, he's just missed the entire offseason. And so it's hard enough for rookie tight ends to make that impact even when they haven't done that. I mean, that really clears the runway for Albert O. Okay, so yeah, we are back up.
We can add Gerald Everett to this build. We can also get Jahan Dotson, who is the last kind of rookie that I see before this. Well, you have Wan'Dale Robinson, obviously, a little bit later that we really like, but Robinson might get back to us in the 13th. I don't know if Dotson will. What are you thinking?
Yeah, I think this probably has to be, Everett, Julio, or Jahan Dotson. I mean, Dotson's upside.
Oh, Julio as well, yeah.
Is pretty crazy, and he is below ADP. I probably would lean that direction.
Dotson, okay, I'm comfortable with that. I don't mind getting the second tight end here, but there's other paths for us to accomplish that later and still get some more tight end upside. Or I would actually argue that we might just want some tight end stability, like a Noah Fant who's been sliding, along with Alberto, who's our kind of upside play in this tight end room. I think Alberto's athleticism and positive outcomes are, potentially pretty huge hits. Gerald Everett, sort of similar. We already have Mike Williams. I think part of the case on Gerald Everett is he could be very efficient. He could catch a lot of touchdowns. We're already saying Mike Williams is going to be such a clear number one for the Chargers when you gave that bold prediction that maybe Everett doesn't make sense on this build. Your bold prediction for Dotson, you've already made it, that he's going to outscore Terry McLaurin this year. And so that's nice and easy. Nice little fit in round 12. I've already made the Trey Lance bold prediction that he's going to run for well over 1,000 yards. When I say well over, maybe not 1,200, but it's not going to be 1,001. He's going to carry nearly 200 times, as opposed to, I talked a lot earlier when we did the big Trey Lance stuff. Even if he gets to 150 carries, that's a ton. But I'm saying he's going to carry close to 200, and he's going to be an efficient passer. That's going to help Aiyuk as well. He's going to be the QB1. I mean, it's definitely in his range of outcomes.
He's going to lead the league in QB rushing, beat Lamar Jackson, beat Kyler Murray.
Yeah.
Beat Jalen Hurts, kind of put those guys all, not just in the rear view to where he really can't see him from where he is.
That would be the idea, yeah. And then he also rushes for 10 touchdowns. He's their goal line back too. So, yeah, I mean, let's just get bold.
Yeah, we want the goal line back. We'd be okay with him throwing passes to Brandon Aiyuk. The goal line back part of it, more than just the rushing volume. If he can take his points away from the running backs and not the wide receivers, and that's a little bit of my thesis for continuing to draft Debo and Brandon Aiyuk. The main thing is just that you want to chase talent. And at those prices, if we're wrong on the team context, then it's a massive win. If you're right, then, I mean, you're still fine. But part of it could be if most of that value from Lance comes out of the runners instead of out of the receivers. Number one, I think that makes the offense much more dynamic, and they have the ability to really put it on a division where, I mean, their schedules are absolutely brutal. They need to finish ahead of the Rams. They need to finish ahead of the Cardinals, and the Cardinals are going to be much better. They're going to be much more similar to what they were in the first half of last season than the second half of last season. This team needs to be very good to accomplish their objectives. And you're like, I mean, that's always the case, but it's much more the case for teams in the AFC West and the NFC West, because the path to getting where they want to go is just so much more difficult than for teams in the other divisions.
Yep, that's very well put. Guy Moore, ceiling case, Juju Smith-Schuster. Unfortunately, the knee is an issue and is not really great. Moore, who has looked, I think, explosive. He had a really nice kick return in the third preseason game. Is an explosive player immediately becomes Patrick Mahomes' new favorite receiver. When you have the type of production profile he did in college, that's certainly in the range of outcomes, even from day one, that he's just that consistent, that he gains Mahomes' trust quickly. When you look at the rest of the pass catching group, I don't think Marquez Valdes-Scantling is that great of a receiver than the type that can gain his trust that quickly. No, Mecole Hardman has struggled to gain the trust of anyone in Kansas City. If Juju's not really healthy, Sky Moore could be by about week 5, Patrick Mahomes number 1 receiver, and at that point, you're talking about an 1,100, 1,200 yard season, even if he gets off to a little bit of a slow start and has to earn that over the first month. And in the playoff week, scores 4 touchdowns in 3 games. There's this guy more upset.
I like it. I think that one of the things with Moore and the Chiefs this year is you're worried about how frustrating it might be to try and pick the weeks when the guys go off. I think this is going to eventually develop, though, into what you're discussing, where you're going to have some Meek Hole scores, you're going to have some MVS long scores, and he's going to be involved all over the field. It's not just the vertical passes, but the big games, when they come, if they come, are going to come mostly from Juju Smith-Schuster, who's much more expensive, or from Sky Moore. And when you think about when those big games are going to come, probably with the veteran versus the rookie and with the injury issues for Juju, I mean, there's so many different ways the season can play out. We get overconfident talking about, general patterns, but the general patterns are there because, they have happened, and there's a strong likelihood that if one of them blows up in the second half, that it would be Sky Moore. I'm very excited about getting some youth into this roster that we're going to try and add a lot of young upside to down the stretch.
So after 12 rounds, we have Saquon Barkley, DeAndre Swift, Mike Williams, Deontay Johnson, Breece Hall, J.K. Dobbins, Brandon Aiyuk, Devonta Smith, Trey Lance, Sky Moore, Albert Okwuegbunam, and Jahan Dotson. We started with the running backs early, 4 in the first 6 rounds. We still got to 6 receivers through 12. We got Sky Moore and Dotson to bring some rookie upside. Aiyuk and Smith, also some young breakout firepower. Mike Williams and Deontay will be our 1-2 guys that we're relying on weekly and really hoping are consistent weekly. A lot of opportunity for Williams in that passing game. Deontay certainly a high target guy who can do it consistently as well. So we're back on the clock here at the 13-10. Who are you thinking, Shawn?
Well, Noah Fant does come back. I guess I feel more comfortable with this offense now that we know Geno is going to be the quarterback. You can say maybe that actually lowers the ceiling, but I think it gives us a lot more floor. I mean, Fant has dealt with horrible quarterback play his entire career. I mean, this isn't anything new for him. I mean, when you look at how it affects their players, it could be new for DK. It could be new for Tyler Lockett. I mean, Noah Fant's going to be like, Geno Smith throws the ball better than Drew Lock threw it to me last year, better than Teddy Bridgewater threw it to me. I don't care about this. I'm ready to go.
Yeah, I like that a lot. So we get our second tight end to pair with Albert Okwuegbunam, who we talked about in the first show, is a guy that, with his athleticism and small sample target earning potential, is a guy that we think could hit in a really big way. But if he is inconsistent, if the routes are inconsistent, there's some concern that Fant's routes could be a little inconsistent. I guess I'm not that concerned in Seattle. They don't have enough playmakers in the passing game. They did sign Will Dissly to a big contract, but Fant's going to be the number one. He's going to run at least a good number of routes. He's going to be out there on passing downs. At least that's the way I see it. And so I think he's a guy that even if Okwuegbunam's role isn't necessarily consistent, we can play Fant as sort of the floor option in this passing in this tight end build. Maybe there's a little less ceiling in the Seattle passing game overall, but really like the value on him in the 13th at 13-10. As it swings back around, Shawn, we still only have those 4 running backs. I don't know that either of us is going to be interested in taking another one, frankly, right, on this build. It's possible.
No, I mean, probably not. The back that I would have been, I would have felt had the upside to do it would probably be Raheem Mostert. He goes in the middle of 12. With him out, I just don't know that we need to take the profiles mostly that are left. We'll see where we are at the very end of the draft. I know that we're not big Evan Ingram fans, but when we talk about sort of athletic upside, we talk about a QB taking the leap. And knowing that Jacksonville has added some interesting players. I think because the contracts were so absurd that, it's actually easy to understate or undervalue how solid Christian Kirk and Zay Jones are. But they don't have some massive target receivers who are going to do it all by themselves. I mean, every time you watch Evan Ingram, he drops an easy pass. Is there any interest here at 1403?
Well, I would be quite a bit higher, I think, on Brevin Jordan as a year 2 tight end who actually had some pretty good per route numbers last year. Ingram's never really shown that. You mentioned the other contracts. In a year where the Jaguars are giving out big contracts, Ingram got a very small, 1 year, like $8 million deal. Very, very simple 1 year veteran deal. If you really want to go that route, I can buy it. He would not. I've been pretty much completely full fading Evan Ingram.
How about KJ Hamler?
Yeah, let's go Hamler. That sounds good. He was the other option for me. He's the best receiver available for me. We can let the tight end position come to us a little bit with both Alberto and Fant on the roster. It leaves us in position to see if Ingram continues to fall. He tends to go in this range, so he is one that is maybe a little harder to get a good price on. Part of the reason I don't necessarily love taking him. But again, with Brevin Jordan there, and then even going deeper, like I've talked a lot about Johnny Smith. You've talked a lot about taking Trey McBride in every build. I think there are other ways that we can add a third tight end, and we have the flexibility for that if we only go 4 running backs, which we're leaning towards with how heavy we went at running back. We talked about this on the first show, but this draft did fall pretty favorably to us for how running back heavy we started. Not a lot of interest in some of the profiles that we are interested in, which is nice. We were able to get Brandon Aiyuk and Devonta Smith at the 7-8 turn. We were able to get Trey Lance at the 9-10. Sky Moore in the 10th round. I've taken him in the 7th in main events. I'm not sure if that was with you, Sean, but I do know I've taken him as high as the 7th. Not a very receiver-heavy draft. The flip side of that, there's been a lot of tight ends that have gone early. We still wound up getting pretty good ones. There's also been a lot of running backs. You talked about how Mostert went in the 12th. Sometimes you can get him in the 15th. There have been a lot of the interesting upside running back profiles. You know, that tier of Darrell Henderson and Michael Carter and Kenneth Gainwell all went in the 10th and 11th. A lot of times that's a tier that's in the 12th and 13th. Naheem Hines went in the 10th. Alexander Madison went in the 10th. Ken Walker, Rashad White at the 10-11 turn. Not a lot of clear value in those sort of 0 RB targets in a way that made it a little bit tougher. There's a drafter in the 9 spot ahead of us who went full 0 RB, went Travis Kelce, CeeDee Lamb, DJ Moore, Allen Robinson, Juju Smith-Schuster, Patrick Mahomes, Drake London, and Amari Cooper in the 8th before ever taking a running back, and then has since gone with 6 straight. James Cook, Naheem Hines, Kenneth Gainwell, Tyler Algier, Eno Benjamin, Mike Davis here in the 14th. So you get a lot of running backs. You know, you have someone doing something that we like to do, 0 RB, really hammering that range. Some of these other drafters have taken a lot of running backs, and so they've been hammering this range as well. Has not really created any running back value in this area, which, again, as I said, was very favorable for us. We very much recognize that. I certainly do. When we start with 4 running backs through 6 rounds, it's a risky proposition to still get the receiver depth you need. But we start with Mike Williams and Deontay Johnson. We get Brandon Aiyuk and Devonta Smith at that 7-8 turn. We talked in the last show. It's a really nice 3rd and 4th receiver that often for us are maybe the 4th and 5th, but we're often taking them, around higher each. To get them as the 3rd and 4th in a draft where we took 4 running backs early, really pretty nice. And then Sky Moore to tack on, and Jahan Dotson and KJ Hamler now to continue to add receiver depth in profiles that we like with upside. We talked in the first show about maybe taking Russell Wilson, but Trey Lance ended up falling to us. Part of the reason we said that was we might take Alberto and KJ Hamler in this draft. We did take both, so we're still kind of playing that part of the Denver passing game with no Tim Patrick there. We didn't take Judy or Cortland Sutton in this draft, so gives us some paths to an exciting team that has exciting profiles that are a little bit buried behind those 2 big name receivers in drafters' minds, but are very worthwhile picks into these rounds. So sort of a recap of where we're at. It's a fun team, Sean, at this point. I mean, we say this on every show, but I think I like this team so much because we went so running back heavy and didn't really pay for it. And you can, but maybe these receivers won't be enough depth, but I feel good about it. I'm not terrified of it, which you can end up doing or feeling if you take 4 running backs in the first 6 rounds. We still get Trey Lance at the 9-10. So without even taking a quarterback in our first 8 rounds, we get a guy that we've talked about as having QB1 overall upside. It doesn't even feel like we played late round quarterback, even though we essentially did. And we still were able to get a couple of intriguing tight end profiles. Don't have the elite tight end, but I think we can get some solid tight end points out of those guys. Where are you at on where we're sitting here?
I just absolutely love it. And I think this is an example of what we talk about from time to time, where have a fun draft. Never come out of the draft and feel like you didn't have enough fun. If you break your structure, if you destroy your build from that perspective, like we have done here, make sure you do it on players that you're excited about, think have huge upside, that you want to root for. It doesn't mean it's going to work, but I just think that the fun draft and sort of the zero bad player draft, I mean, that's how you put together these teams where at the end of the season, everybody else is kind of looking back on you and saying, I mean, how did they get that team? It doesn't seem like ADP would have allowed it. That's sort of what we're hoping to do with those 4 early running backs, is to have a team where, regardless of which players actually come through, that some players do, and drafters are trying to figure out, how that build was available. Tight end is the question, right? With Albert O, Noah Fant, one of the things, if you look up on the ceiling signals tool, you see that Fant's route profile, targets per route, that type of thing, almost identical to Dalton Schultz. And that's despite the fact that he was playing with Albert O there, right? Albert O's profile in the limited numbers just, through the roof. These guys, now that they're separate, I think we could see some big things. It doesn't mean that we necessarily will. It's not a lock. And we know that Dalton Schultz is obviously going to get much more efficient QB play than Fant. He's a touchdown play in the Cowboys offense. I think that Fant may end up being a reception play here in this Seahawks offense, and this is tight end premium. So there is a little bit of value to that. We're 3 picks away here.
To your point about the gap between Fant and Schultz, I think certainly the reason drafters are drafting it the way they are is because the Dallas passing game is going to throw a lot more. You get more route certainty with Schultz. He runs, or is likely to run, probably quite a lot of their routes. There's a little more concern with whether Fant will run all of their routes and how much Seattle will pass. But I like what you're saying. I mean, if Seattle throws more than we expect and Fant has that type of role, I mean, those things can definitely come together. From a per route perspective, he's going to be basically right there with Schultz if the routes get to Schultz's level. We are back on the clock. Evan Ingram did go, who you were lobbying for when we took KJ Hamler last pick. Brevin Jordan made it back. He's kind of interesting. Who are you thinking here?
Well, the Isaiah Likely play is kind of fun. I think he might have more upside in their more explosive offense. David Bell is the top player I have on my board, but you don't necessarily need to take him yet. Alec Pierce would give us another one of those breakout rookies. Christian Watson. I mean, if we want to take some swings at wide receiver, we could do it here.
Bell's the top receiver on my board as well. Christian Watson still being there is pretty interesting. Yeah, I mean, I'm comfortable with any of those. If you want to go Likely, so we do go Likely. Christian Watson goes right behind us. I didn't know where we're at in the clock, but it seems like that was
we got down to 2. Christian Watson probably would have been another very good way to play it. Again, just because there's so much uncertainty there. And I mean, at the end of the season, Benner, I mean, you're looking at Lazard, Watson, and Dobbs as the 3 guys, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be it. And Watson is the cheap way to play it now. I love Dobbs, but when you get Watson 4 rounds behind, that's certainly a nice pick. But we went with the Likely pick. He has looked really good. Their number 2 receivers are not coming on. Is the idea behind this pick that they're going to be running 2 tight ends in most of their pass routes?
I think so. And I mean, they need him to be the number 3 receiver. He's looked that good. He was just an absolute, one-man juggernaut in college, and then didn't test quite as well. And so he falls out. I mean, it was really Likely and McBride who were the 2 tight ends from this class who looked like potential stars. And then, Likely sort of fades. Now he's right back in the mix with how he's looked in the offseason in the preseason, and not just that, but in their practices as well.
I like that idea. We are back on the clock. We do have other ways to play receiver. Do you care for a fourth tight end? Or do you want to try to just lock up David Bell here?
Well, let's not risk Bell. I mean, Pierce would be interesting. I'm not on him, but I think at this price, it gets to be kind of interesting. Now, the most recent development is it looks like he could be behind Paris Campbell. But again, I mean, you're talking about not being overly worried about week 1 for these guys. We don't want to lose David Bell. I don't think that he's going to go. But if he did, we get into round 16, and there's no need to get someone in round 18 instead of round 16 if he's a very clear target for you. I know that in some ways it sounds like a broken record, Ben, but there are a number of depth charts here where the veteran big name is expensive because the rest of the roster is unproven. And yet, if the passing game looks like it's going to have some questions, then, and if the rookie is probably the better talent at this point in their respective careers. I mean, Terry McLaurin has been disappointing, and I'm not sure he's a great fit with Carson Wentz either, right? I mean, Jahan Dotson has been the better guy. Amari Cooper, David Bell, I think that you have to make that bet when an offense could just be in shambles for the first 2/3 of the season. But there is volume potential there, especially when David Bell has been a guy who soaks up massive volume. I mean, it's a big difference making that jump from the NFL, from college to the NFL. But again, we're talking about a guy who generates a lot of
targets.
Keenan Allen, Jarvis Landry comps because of just what you said, all of those targets. And I think especially when we don't have to play him in the first month and the Browns can kind of get their feet under him, it's another really good stash to have.
Yeah, I like that. He's our 8th receiver. Continuing now in this build where we started with a lot of running backs to add rookie and young profiles that we think could break out, maybe won't be great in week 1. We talked a little bit about how Breece Hall on the first show as part of our 4 early running backs still might not be a clear early season play. He might be. Certainly we'll be starting our first 2 running backs, Saquon Barkley and DeAndre Swift. J.K. Dobbins, basically as soon as he's healthy, will be expecting to start in the flex. And so you're talking about needing 3 receivers in the early part of the year. We have Mike Williams and Deontay Johnson and Brandon Aiyuk and Devonta Smith as sort of guys that we can certainly play in the early part of the year. And then behind that, we've taken Sky Moore, Jahan Dotson, KJ Hamler, David Bell, obviously 3 rookies there, and Hamler, a guy who's hardly played through 2 seasons. And we're still largely leaning on his prospect profile as a bet that he is more than, what his draft position might suggest. And certainly with Tim Patrick being injured, there is some potential for Hamler to play a good amount in a good passing game. And so suddenly you have 4 guys tacked onto that build that we might not need to play at all early in the year. And we're really hoping, as you described with Bell, but it extends beyond Bell, are guys that will be able to play once they start developing a consistent role in their offenses. And we see that with the rookie receivers a lot, especially that later in the season they tend to be more productive. You can think back to Amon-Ra St. Brown as the easy one to call out from last year, but he's not the only player. Certainly that's a long time trend. Go back to my favorite guy, AJ Brown, who didn't do a lot in the first half of his career. His route numbers were so funny. The first month they're at a certain rate, and his snap numbers, I think they were in the 40 to 50% range. And the next month, it's like they just immediately scaled them up. At week 5, they're in the 60% range, and then week 9 or week 10 is when he first hit 80% plus snaps. And so they're scaling up sort of, and down the stretch from week 9 or week 10, he was the wide receiver 6 in his rookie season. So if these guys can play, they might have to earn the role a little bit, but we could certainly use some late season firepower. We're hoping that we'll have the receiver depth from maybe week 9, week 10 through the playoff shootout, despite not taking many receivers early, taking only 2 in our first 6 picks. So Really like the way that's coming together. We'll probably tack on another receiver. We have 3 tight ends already. We talked about how with these 4 running backs, we're not likely to add another. So as we get back towards our pick, Sean, a lot of the veteran receivers have gone. Like you mentioned, Paris Campbell with respect to Alec Pierce, he had already gone. Jarvis Landry had already gone, a name you were talking about with the David Bell comp. Julio Jones, we talked about a little bit when we were on the clock around the 11-12 turn. He went in the 12th round where he typically goes. My guy Jacoby Myers went in the 12th round. A lot of defenses going off here in the 16th and 17th round. A lot of people getting their D early. We have not seen a single receiver go, and we do not see a single receiver go until we get back on the clock at 17:10 after taking David Bell. And thus, Alec Pierce is still sitting there. And I don't think I can keep denying you the opportunity to take another rookie.
Well, we also have Robbie Anderson here. I still just want more and more players, right? It'd be fun to draft Marcus Mariota. It'd be fun to draft either Jonnu Smith or Trey McBride. We do have 2 picks plus the kicker and defense. We can add 2 more guys. These are fun options.
Yeah, there's a lot of ways to play this. I guess I don't think Robbie Anderson makes a ton of sense, even though we do have the 4 that maybe don't have consistent roles. And Robbie might feel like he has the most consistent role of anyone we took after our first 4 receivers.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It just isn't in best ball, there's a lot of reason to believe that he would be the perfect fit for this build. In managed, really not so much. We do get down to 3 seconds there and click the button on Pierce. He's one where I do like having a little bit of exposure because, there's some Chase Claypool type of upside. There's some DJ Chark type of upside. Obviously, Chark's was a second year where he scored those points. But, in the 17th round, you don't have to pay anything to watch that for a few weeks, and someone who will be easy to cut when we see that first big waiver acquisition that we need to make. Then we've got either these 2 tight ends that we could go through here. If there was one we didn't want to miss, we could try and lock in a kicker from one of these good offenses.
I'm comfortable with either of those paths. We do have 4 kickers off the board already, though. Evan McPherson, Tucker, Butker, Tyler Bass. Those are kind of the 4 that I like. Who would the kicker be for you?
Well, we could go with Carlson. We could go with Matt Gay. Oh, the thing we talked about the other day, McBride and Jonnu are basically not getting drafted. And so, or they're going in the second half of the 20th round. So we do have some flexibility too.
But a lot of people already took defenses and kickers in this draft. So it is possible that, and I think we're going to get a lot more player picks. Maybe I'm thinking through that backwards. It doesn't really matter, I guess, if they're going in the second half of the 20th round. Yeah, I don't know where we're on the clock, but whatever path you prefer. There's a couple ways to do this, and it's not really that important. I think there's plenty of non-kickers that we could go to if we want to go kicker here. And those guys, were to go. So we take Matt Gay. He kicks for the Rams, right? I need to be reminded of these things. Yeah. So that, we would have to take 2 kickers, but that would leave open the Thursday night thing if we wanted to take 2 kickers. I'm not sure if we want to do that, but this is the type of team where we only went 4 running backs and we already have 3 tight ends and we have 9 receivers that maybe we could spare an extra roster spot for week 1 and then cut the kicker that we don't want to keep after week 1. And the reason you would do that, we talked about this on the last show, is the Thursday night players, you get to decide after Thursday night football is played whether you want to put them in your week 1 lineup. So if we had Matt Gay and he kicked a lot of field goals, we can put him in. If he didn't, we could go with another kicker. But that is a decision that we would have to make based on our drafted roster. So we'd have to have another kicker on our team.
And
Another player,
I do like that, right? I'm not saying that I'm, mentally or emotionally committed to it, but I have argued for it in the past because the very last thing that you want to do is lose in week 1. And we know that these kicker scores have the potential to be very low or just randomly super high.
yeah, if they score 4 touchdowns and don't have any field goals, I mean, I was thinking that the Bills Rams is going to be a high scoring game probably, but if he doesn't kick a field goal, he could have 4 points in week 1.
The worst thing as a fantasy manager is to be there, especially like if it's a Monday Night Football, but to be watching and see your team get behind early, and you're like, well, I mean, field goals aren't even going to make sense the rest of this game. You just feel dead when you're trying to come back there at the end. As you mentioned, I mean, that game should be very competitive, but it's especially, I think, with some of the issues they've had with Stafford. I don't know how fast of a start the Rams are actually going to get off to. And if there's a team that could bury them and put them in a situation where they were not kicking a lot of field goals, it would be the Buffalo Bills.
Yeah, so that's definitely one to consider. A name I was going to throw out, if we did want to think about a 5th running back, Sean, is one of my favorite handcuffs at the very end of drafts. Samaje Perine is still out there. He's a good football player, had a good prospect profile, has been pretty good in limited time behind Joe Mixon. I think if Mixon goes down, you're likely to see both Perine and Chris Evans, with Evans taking some of the receiving work. But I do think you would be pretty comfortable betting on Perine, who will turn 27 here in September. He's not super old, doesn't have a ton of work at the NFL level under him, actually only has 306 career carries. And he's actually a pretty decent receiver. Had 27 catches last year. Somebody that I think would be pretty clearly startable if Mixon were to go down. I don't know if he makes sense in this build, but it's kind of interesting to consider. I remember years ago, I think it was maybe Josh Hermsmeyer at RotoViz did some work and showed that a high percentage of the running back injuries actually tend to occur in the first couple of weeks. And that once you get into the season to a certain degree, the long-term injuries at least, once you get into the season a certain degree, the rate of injuries, per week, if you will, starts to fall a little bit. So I don't mind having some of these handcuffs to see if there is, an unfortunate, but, a reality part of football. If there is a major injury early in the season, I think Perine would be a pretty easy cut by like week 2 if we decided that we didn't really want to hang on to him. But he might also actually have a passing role, which would be sort of interesting if he were to take 3rd downs and Evans didn't have them. Anyway, that's one potential other consideration I was thinking about.
And I put Chris Evans on the 0 RB watch list because I do think he has immense upside. He's got the physical talent. He's got a little bit of receiving skill there. But I also mentioned in that piece that you and I and Pat and Pete took Samaje Perine in our main event draft because he's actually the backup and is a good player. He does go at the 18-19 turn to, again, a drafter whom we're familiar with. So not a huge surprise there. Ben, we're now getting to be about 5 picks away. This is kind of the requisite time to note that Will Fuller is always still available.
I mean, honest take on Will Fuller, I think he made a lot of sense all throughout the offseason to be taking. It was very likely, even though we hadn't heard anything, that he would sign. We saw when Julio signed how Julio started being a 10th, 11th, 12th round pick. And he was going in the same range as Will Fuller was. At this stage of the offseason, the concern for me is not just whether he signs. It's even if he does sign, does he get up to, like, how fast does he get up to speed? How long are we holding him until it seems using him? Because it seems clear at this point, we sit here on August 28th drafting, nobody has thought that they need to bring him in to improve their receiver depth.
Well, you talk about getting up to speed, but I mean, Will Fuller is known for consistency, right? And playing in almost all the games, not having any issues.
Yeah, so that's, reliability certainly is his middle name. I don't know that. I mean, I think I would prefer the 2 kicker move, but the Fuller move obviously has more upside.
but also maybe one that is kind of an in-season play.
It's an easy play to make in season is the other thing I'm thinking. Like we would probably be more willing to bid on him than anyone else. And we probably wouldn't have to bid $500 to get him. It's, a guy that people are pretty skeptical of. So if he does sign, the Will Fuller lovers probably are able to get him for, I don't know, less than 20% of their budget is what I would say. But I don't want to speculate too much. It'll be interesting to see if he does play at all this year. You'd think he's going to play somewhere at some point, right?
Yes. I mean, my most recent thought is that, he may be targeting that first week when Deshaun Watson is back with the Cleveland Browns. There are obviously plenty of other things that could happen, but
if the Browns are like 3-8, why would they do that?
Well, just to get it ready for next year.
Got it. That actually makes sense. I now have a logical potential Fuller thing in my brain that could happen. So we now see our fourth drafter here in the 19th take a second defense. The fourth team that has done that so far in this draft take two defenses. Two of those teams have Buffalo and the Rams. We talked about with the kickers, how they're going to be able to see how many points Buffalo and the Rams score in week one, and then they can go with the other defense if those defenses don't score a lot. Shawn, we're back on the clock. You thinking a player? You thinking another kicker? You thinking grabbing our defense here and making that decision on the wrap? What are we thinking?
Yeah, well, this might not be a bad spot to take Tennessee, given what you mentioned with all of these teams taking multiple defenses.
Yeah.
The Titans have Daniel Jones and the New York Giants in week one.
Yeah, we know they're going to throw a good amount. We have our guy Saquon Barkley, so if they shut down Barkley, at least our defense will get points. It's actually, potentially vaguely correlated. When I was talking about Barkley's big target profile, if he plays a ton in week one, if they trail and if they have to throw a lot, there might be a lot of dump offs and there could be some pick sixes, and then that gets the Giants back on the field and maybe some more dump offs. So we were doing upside scenarios in our first show for this draft. My upside scenario for Tennessee is in week one, they get 2 pick sixes, and it also leads to 10 Saquon Barkley receptions in the fourth, 8 of them in the fourth quarter.
And that's definitely what we were thinking about when we selected Barkley at number 10 overall. You mentioned the bold predictions, and we have still, I said David Bell is going to be the number 1 for the Browns. We kind of glossed over a little bit, but KJ Hamler is going to be a rich man's Tyler Lockett, right? This is one of the things about the Albert O pick too. And we had talked about how Dulcich not being there helps him, but it also creates a dynamic where I would expect to see more 3 receiver sets. Is that the way that you would expect that to go to? This offense, when it had Patrick and when there was the strong possibility of Dulcich being a big part all the way through the season, despite the immense talent, it was difficult to see the paths that would work for KJ Hamler, but already pretty early on, it's cleaned up quite a bit.
Yeah, and so Dulcich, it sounds like he's not going to be ready in week one. Is that it? He's not out long-term or anything, is he?
No, but just, again, he hasn't been able to really do anything. And so he's got that build back into, just being an NFL rookie that you really want to take care of some of that during training camp in the preseason. Hasn't really been able to. We are on the clock, have 40 seconds. We can do the kickers. I kind of like Johnny Smith or Trey McBride here. I'm also tempted just to, Marcus Mariota is going to score a ton of points. We probably don't need him, but there is a scenario where Trey Lance melts down or gets hurt in week one and Marcus Mariota scores 35. I wish we had more picks, Ben. Who would you like for our final selection?
Well, I would be Johnny. I figure you'd be McBride. I think we can go either route on that. I don't want to worry about the Mariota thing too much. If Lance melts down, we'll have to add Mariota off waivers.
So we take the 4th tight end, and a lot of what we're talking about here is at least mild justification for a build that we know isn't very good. But when you take the 4 running backs early and then you don't take any more, it does free up some positional flexibility to attack a position that you maybe got really behind on because you took those early running backs. We've taken 4 tight ends. I like all 4 of them. Likely a wild card, but Albert O, Noah Fant, Johnny Smith, especially in tight end premium, I think all 3 of those guys should be going multiple rounds earlier.
I agree. And I think Jonnu, the case I would make for why he made sense there, and I am glad we took him. There's a case for McBride as well from an early season perspective with DeAndre Hopkins out, but with so much favorable conversation about Rondell Moore, I guess I'm thinking that we're going to probably have a little bit of a slower start for McBride. The Jonnu thing is, I think we'll know in week 1 if things are different, right? Like almost immediately. I talked on one of our recent shows about how he apparently had caught the second most passes in Patriots camp from Mac Jones, according to one beat reporter's tracking. Last year, Jonnu was still pretty solid from a per route basis. He just didn't run routes. He has that big contract. Sean, you speculated, and I've loved that maybe Bill Belichick, the coach, will be interested. And Will Fuller does go at 2011. That's interesting. But maybe Bill Belichick, the coach, will be trying to justify Bill Belichick, the GM's contract this year, now that Josh McDaniels is no longer there, and using Jonnu a little bit more effectively. I think in week 1, we're going to see pretty quickly, did he run more routes than, I'll tell you right now, and for stealing signals week 1, I'm going to have a signal that if Jonnu Smith runs more routes like I'm hoping and thinking he might, that could very much be like, look, he ran more routes than he did in any game last year. Like that's a very, I would say that's a high probability signal. If we see it, I will certainly, if we see it, I would say it's a high probability that I will write that as a signal. That would be, I think, justification immediately for taking him in the 20th round on this build. And then we'd have a few more weeks to figure out what we have. If he doesn't run a lot of routes in week 1, then we can move on pretty quickly as well. We have the 4 tight ends. We don't need to carry them all. It's sort of similar to Likely. We're going to find out, I think, pretty quickly with the wide receiver 2s not really being healthy, if Likely's actually going to get to run a lot of routes in the regular season when Mark Andrews is running a lot of routes. And if we see that quickly, that could be a quick justification for having him on the roster. If we don't, I don't know that Likely's one that we'll want to cut right away, but he might be somebody that we're willing to get rid of fairly early into the season as well. So taking both of those de facto tight end 2s in the same build where we took 4 tight ends, I actually kind of really like, because I think we're going to get early information on both to see how much they're involved and how many routes they're running right away, even if they're not catching a ton of passes.
And one of the concerns with Jonnu has been just, the H-backish kind of role. But even that, if the situation with Ty Montgomery turns out to be something that's going to keep him out for a while, maybe change what they had planned, that could work in his favor too. Jonnu Smith, extremely athletic. That was one of the reasons why he got that big contract. There is some reason to be excited about Jacoby Myers, Ben. You'll be happy to know that I think in both of the drafts that I did late last night took Jacoby Myers. But this isn't a team that has...
We got him all the way back around.
It is success for Team Ben on that one. We can check that box. But this isn't a team that has so much wide receiver firepower that both Henry and Smith couldn't have some value. And we know it's not the same offense that these other things happened in, but the Patriots have done it before with Gronkowski and Hernandez. We wanted some Jonnu. This is the perfect team to land him in, because tight end in the 20th round made the perfect sense. Trey McBride does not get selected. And that was one of the things that I was thinking there too, is that we do have the possibility for adding him. I think it's surprising. You look at the late tight ends that are going, and my preference is always to take more upside. We'll see whether or not that turns out to actually be the case or not. Basically, in the late rounds, you're taking your guys, and one way or another, you've convinced yourself that those are the players who have upside. Different drafters have different names on their list. It doesn't mean that they are wrong. But out of the 110, again, if you're gonna blow your build, then you want it to be one of these draft slots where you're not making, I don't want to say mistakes, but doing some kind of crazy things when you have a shot at a Christian McCaffrey, Jonathan Taylor, Justin Jefferson type of team. So then that will take us to the end of the draft. We end up in team robust running back territory. 4 running backs in the first 6 rounds. We are only bested by the team in the 6th slot who took 4 running backs in the first 4 rounds. That team: Najee Harris, Aaron Jones, Nick Chubb, David Montgomery. Again, you're drafting off your own board, so this should be the case. But I prefer our 4 guys. What other teams jump out to you here?
Well, yeah, I think one of the really interesting elements about how many running backs we took is we have talked, maybe not so much this year, but about how I remember last year really emphasizing how I know it's been true for you for a long time, and it's becoming far more true for me, or it is certainly in 2022, how there's not a lot of running backs, even early, where you're okay taking some running backs that I even want to take. And we talked about this a little bit with the age stuff in the 2023 first and second round shows. There are a lot of backs in those early rounds that are a little bit older. There's not a ton that are even clear targets because there's not a ton that are young, frankly. Barkley is one that's 25. He's not super young, but we do like to target DeAndre Swift, Breece Hall, J.K. Dobbins. We wind up with a robust build, if you will. I'm kind of doing air quotes, though, because these are 4 guys that are, from a profile perspective, running backs we're willing to take among relatively few, frankly, in the first several rounds. So from that perspective, I think it's interesting to think through. It's part of the reason we don't land on robust or running back heavy builds. It's not necessarily that we think running backs can't score points. It's also that some of these running back profiles are pretty risky. And then there's, an element of a cost benefit analysis as well, in terms of what we're giving up at the wide receiver position in a build to take the running back bet. In this case, these were 4 players that we felt it was worth giving things up to build this way. Again, it would have to have been a very specific set of running backs, and our rankings are going to reflect that typically. As far as the other interesting teams, the team out of team 1, we talked about a little bit throughout the draft, did really nicely. Started Christian McCaffrey and Javonte Williams, got A.J. Brown as well at that 2-3 turn. The McCaffrey, Javonte Williams 2 running back start was not followed by another running back until round 10, where they got Kenneth Walker and Rachaad White, 2 guys that were on the 0 RB watch list, 2 rookies with certain paths and pretty clear upside if those paths exist, materialize. They also got Jalen Hurts to stack with A.J. Brown. Jerry Jeudy, Terry McLaurin, Christian Kirk, Kadarius Toney, and then didn't go back to receiver until the 13th round with Michael Gallup. If I have one criticism, it's that, Sean, we're not very on Terry McLaurin. Christian Kirk might be interesting. You said some favorable things about him recently, but not a guy that I typically would take at 6'12", especially in a draft like this where like Drake London was available at that spot. Kadarius Toney, also a guy that you can clearly see in his route profile has upside. I've been somewhat scared off. Michael Gallup seems like he's potentially going to be healthy early in the year. They're talking about him not going on to the PUP list. Maybe that's just optimism trying to get him back. I had talked a few weeks ago that I thought he might be back in the first few weeks because of the lack of PUP, which seemed to be the note they were talking about. But getting more information on his timeline and remembering when he was actually injured and when his surgery was, some of the sharp individuals that are tracking the medical side of things have said that's still going to be pretty quick for Gallup to get back and be really be really productive in the first month of the season. So I've not been pushing him very much lately as a result. So anyway, A.J. Brown, Jerry Jeudy, good receivers there, but don't necessarily love the receiver depth in that build. But Cole Kmet, a tight end we like. Again, Jalen Hurts, a QB we like that's stacked. I think he did really well to wait on running back, but then also get some upside profiles. That's a good team in team 1.
It is. And it just looking at what we have done, looking at what his choices were at the 6-7 turn, when we took J.K. Dobbins at the 6:03 as our 4th back, the next 3 running backs, 3 wide receivers selected were Allen, Lazard, Adam Thielen, and Christian Kirk. I mean, you couldn't take any of those guys ahead of J.K. Dobbins. That would be absurd. And so if you hit a flat spot, if you hit a massive tier break, that's when you have to be willing to be flexible. I am a little surprised that Drake London lasted as long as he did, given some of those other options. We did have multiple rounds in this draft. Round 9, 0 wide receivers. Round 7, given that often is a big part of the wide receiver avalanche, none in the first 7 picks. So we had some long stretches where if you were hoping for the wide receiver to come back to you, you did have a shot at it. The team out of 9, who I believe was also in the draft and made excellent value picks out of the 6th spot in our first main event, goes 0 RB, finishes with Amari Cooper in round 8. Even if you're skeptical about that, when you start Travis Kelce, CeeDee Lamb, DJ Moore, Allen Robinson, Juju Smith-Schuster, Patrick Mahomes, Drake London, and Amari Cooper. And again, I mean, Amari Cooper in round 8 is a lot different than Amari Cooper in round 5, which is something that was the case for big chunks of the offseason. And then another stretch where we have numerous players from the 0 RB watch list: James Cook, Nyheim Hines, Kenneth Gainwell, Tyler Algier, Eno Benjamin, Mike Davis, Kyron Williams, Boston Scott. Interesting to have both Gainwell and Scott there. I think that you are obviously hoping one of those 2 players emerge and you can cut the other one if they cannibalize the kind of backup role. Then that won't be as good. But 3 players in that group from the 0 RB watch. We don't have as many sort of extreme builds in this draft as we're starting to see. One of the things that it can actually give you a pretty significant advantage, especially and really exclusively if it's wide receiver heavy. We start to see a lot of teams now, even if they do take a running back in the first round, maybe even running back, then we won't see them select any more wide receivers until the double-digit rounds. You mentioned that kind of right, any more running backs. We don't see teams really outside of 1 and 9 go on sort of these massive wide receiver stretches that are so frequent these days. Out of 2, we get a robust, it's sort of a bully tight end plus start, where Jonathan Taylor, Mike Evans, George Kittle, Dalton Schultz, Brandon Cooks, TJ Hawkinson. We really like Hawkinson. George Kittle has been an absolute superstar. Dalton Schultz doesn't really seem to fit into this team because you're looking for those touchdowns. If he goes for a couple of games, doesn't get the touchdowns, then when you have Kittle and Hawkinson, maybe he goes back to the bench, then he scores touchdowns. That team did put some pressure on the rest of the league at the tight end position, and yet, fortunately for us, we were still able to get our own targets.
Yeah, you mentioned as well the Dobbins pick and the receivers that went after that. For me, the next receivers on the board were Drake London, Devonta Smith, and Brandon Aiyuk at that point. London comes all the way back around to 709, goes off the board 1 pick before us, but we do get Aiyuk and Devonta Smith at the 7-8 turn. So that's probably the key moment in our draft, I would say, in that Dobbins pick for me felt a little bit like we were pressing it and really risking our receiver depth. We had taken Barkley, Swift, Mike Williams, Deontay Johnson, and then Breece Hall at 5'10 was just so hard to pass up. Our third running back, Dobbins at 6'03, also hard to pass up. But only 5 receivers go between Dobbins and Aiyuk. You mentioned the 3, Lazard, Thielen, Kirk, DeAndre Hopkins, and then Drake London were the 2 that went in the first 9 picks of the 7th round. You mentioned how the 7th round opened with 7 straight picks without a receiver. Those 2 went back-to-back right before us at 7-10. I would have thought that London, Aiyuk, and Smith would have all been gone before the 7-10. We wouldn't have gotten any of them. So to get Aiyuk and Devonta Smith at 7-10 and 803, and then to get Trey Lance at the 9-10 on top of that, because then we had gone 8 rounds without a quarterback, and we wind up getting Trey Lance, who I'm comfortable taking at the 7-8 turn. We get him at the 9-10. That was a very key moment in our draft. We also got Sky Moore at 1003, who I mentioned I've taken as high as the 7th round in main events. Getting that type of receiver value after the 4 running backs we took in the first 6 rounds, guys that we like, getting them to fall and being able to grab them in that 7, 8, 9, 10 range was just so helpful for our build and for us liking our build and not having to take some players that maybe we didn't necessarily love because we needed to get some receivers on the team.
And you talk about the risk and the joy of having it pan out. And, just sometimes you do get the breaks in your favor. To emphasize that tier break after Devontae Smith, the next 5 wide receivers in that round are Amari Cooper, Chase Claypool, Robert Woods, Tyler Lockett, Kadarius Toney. Again, you don't know the future. I mean, some of those picks could work out, but there's a monster gap between what we were able to get and the guys who come after them, and then no wide receivers in round 9. If we get hit and those guys are gone, then it's an absolute desert. Probably the next guy on our board is Sky Moore, who we selected in round 10. So we have to kind of thank the fantasy gods a little bit there. They were kind to us after the running back early start.
As excited as we are about that, I will say that in some respects, I was kind of excited to see what you were going to suggest we do with this build after taking Dobbins, if that stuff wouldn't have fallen to us. How do you see that 7 to 10 round falling if it doesn't fall so favorably? I think that would be very helpful for listeners who maybe find themselves questioning some of these robust RB builds. We're not really giving a lot of advice when we're saying, oh, hey, this really worked out. We got the receivers that we would have taken in the 6th round, in the 7th and 8th. Let's say Aiyuk and Smith were gone. What do we do at 7, 8? Let's say Lance doesn't come back. We talked through that a little bit. We were thinking about Fields maybe later, or even taking Russell Wilson there and then playing Denver's offense, pass offense through some of their cheaper weapons. We did wind up with 2 of them, Alberto and KJ Hamler. But what would you have been thinking in those ranges if receivers did go off pretty heavily in the 7th round?
Yeah, one thing that we were kind of gambling on was this idea that either Elijah Moore, DK Metcalf, or Darnell Mooney would come back to us. That probably is not the right gamble to make, although ADP suggests it's going to work out most of the time. And so
to clarify, that's at the 5-6 turn.
We 5-6.
Breece Hall 5-10, Elijah Moore goes 5-11, DK Metcalf goes 5-12, Darnell Mooney goes 6-01. The 3 picks in a row after our Breece Hall 5-10 pick, and 3 of the 4 picks before we were back on the clock at 6:03 and took Dobbins.
And if any of the 3 of them had been there, then we would have taken that player. And that's kind of how we were looking to play it, not necessarily trying to put ourselves into this situation where we have to get lucky coming back around. Yeah, and again, just underlines, I think, the Lance value, because if Aiyuk and Smith aren't there, then you're probably taking Lance at the 7-10. And again, that's just a huge gap between that and where we got him at the 9-10. You're probably taking him there, and I think that you're probably taking a tight end, because the receivers are just, it's just such terrible value. You don't want to ever get into a situation where you think, okay, I've blown it, and now I'm going to take players because of ADP that I don't have ranked in that range. It's important to not be constantly reaching and not to give away any value that you have in your own rankings. And, sometimes your rankings are going to be right. Sometimes they're going to be wrong. If you have a good ability to both sort of track the news, but more importantly, do the player evaluations to where you understand kind of big picture and player profiles more than thinking, okay, I'm going to hit on any individual guy, then your rankings are going to be valuable. They're going to give you some extra value. But as soon as you start reaching on all of them, then you give away a lot of that value. At the same time, you don't ever want to get stuck just taking some random player because you're scared to ever select someone who's not an ADP value. But in this case, we would have taken Trey Lance, and then we would have taken a tight end because we wanted to save the picks then. So what we ended up doing was taking Lance in 9 and Albert O in 11. If we hadn't had receivers for the 7-8, we would have used those positions at QB and tight end. And then in 9, 10, 11, we would have taken wide receivers in a range where our board relative to ADP is giving us guys we really like.
And we might have been taking Traylon Burks at that point, even if Sky Moore didn't make it back. He winds up going in the middle of the 11th round. We might have taken Rondell Moore at the 9-10. I think that makes a lot of sense. probably how that team would have wound up. Trey Lance instead of Aiyuk, maybe Cole Kmet or whoever at 803. And then, something like a Traylon Burks at 910 and potentially Rondell Moore in that range. Maybe Rondell at 910, Traylon Burks at 1003. So, yeah, would have been a very different build. We would have also been replacing the Albert O pick at 1110 with a receiver that, we wind up getting Jahan Dotson at 1203. We're probably taking Jahan Dotson at 1110 in that scenario, 1203. Maybe we take Julio. It would have been a very different receiver build through that range without some of those values that fall, but I think you put that well. One of the things you hit on there sparked a thought for me that I was trying to drive home to some listeners over at Ship Chasing a few months back. And it was, for me, partially sparked by a friend who had asked in a Superflex rookie draft, they needed to get some quarterbacks. Their quarterbacks weren't strong and wanted to try to get into the second round of this group. And this was, before the preseason where this quarterback class has started to look better, but certainly after the draft where the quarterback class didn't look good. And I was explaining sort of a long way of saying, just because you need quarterbacks doesn't mean this quarterback class can solve that problem for you. You can't take them over. And he was talking about taking them potentially in the early second. In Superflex, that certainly happens, but there were some good receiving profiles available for these rookies. So my argument was you can't take these quarterbacks after the draft, where I had certainly soured a little bit. Pre-draft, I was out there taking these quarterbacks in rookie drafts at the 1-2 turn in Superflex, thinking, as we talked about all offseason, that those quarterbacks might go a little higher.
And Howell may still pay that off for you.
Howell may still pay that off. I'm optimistic. And Ritter might as well. He's been looking good in the preseason. But I took them over like George Pickens in some drafts, and I'm certainly regretting that at this point where we sit in late August. But that'll happen in Dynasty. Anyway, the question was about taking a very aggressive stance on one of these rookies post-draft after we knew their draft positions were, for most of them into day 3. Or at least into day 2, into round 3. I can't remember exactly where all those quarterbacks ended up falling in the draft, but I was explaining that on Ship Chasing. The reason I'm telling the story is Pat Kerrane had the greatest one line as I was trying to make a broader point. He summed it up so well. He said, the draft doesn't care what your needs are. I always talk about how it also relates to the NFL draft, right? Where you can't take, best player available. You need to get players that are good first. It doesn't necessarily matter what position or anything. The draft doesn't care what your needs are. Very applicable to fantasy football. You just described that so well. If Aiyuk and Smith didn't fall to us, just because we needed to hit receivers there, doesn't mean that if our draft wasn't allowing us to hit receivers there, that we would have started to take really bad receivers, because that's how you build a bad team. What you need to do first and foremost is make good picks on good players. And so, as you said, if we were in that range and didn't have any receivers that were anywhere near the value of what we wanted, and the draft didn't care that we needed a receiver, we would have gone to QB and tight end and tried to get a lot of difference-making point potential at those positions and continued to push receiver, which was uncomfortable, or would have been uncomfortable, is always uncomfortable for us, but would have been the decision, because you can't solve a problem just because you want to. Like that friend of mine trying to solve the Superflex quarterback problem in the 2022 quarterback class that didn't really have any great options. Early in his rookie draft, I was saying, you can't solve it this year, or you have to trade, or you have to wait until 2023 rookie drafts. Taking those quarterbacks above a good receiver or a Trey McBride tight end in Dynasty would have been compounding the problem, because now you're probably not going to solve your QB problem anyway, and you're not going to have another potential star on your Dynasty team. Same concept here. Very important one to think about in any build that you're doing. The draft doesn't care what your needs are. You need to draft really good players. And, sometimes the draft is going to push you away from the type of structure that you want. And that's how you have to be flexible. And that's how you see us be flexible sometimes. It's also, I think, a better example probably, what we did at the 5-6 turn, right? The draft didn't care that we started Saquon Barkley, DeAndre Swift in the 1-2 turn. When Breece Hall and J.K. Dobbins were in those spots and there weren't receivers that we loved more than them, we would have probably preferred that we started Kyle Pitts at 110 and maybe even CeeDee Lamb at 203. But the draft doesn't really care that we started running back, and we don't get to change that at that point. So what we did was we went to a robust running back build, did not take another running back the rest of the draft, built as the draft was letting us build. Very fortunate that the receiver value then started to fall to us, as we said, but the decisions we made in those spots were driven by this idea that we got to take what the draft gives us sometimes and be flexible, and then think critically about, okay, now that we've been flexible and taken 4 running backs in the first 6 rounds, never our plan. How do we then build from there?
And you mentioned the possibility of taking Kyle Pitts, CeeDee Lamb. That would be an interesting team too. You flip those 2 guys in instead, and suddenly then in round 11, we're probably looking at that 11-12 range. It'd be a little bit early, but perhaps Tyler Algier and Raheem Mostert in those 2 picks. You come back in 13 and 14 and probably take Jerick McKinnon. Benjamin goes 1 spot ahead of where we selected Noah Fant. That would be a fun team too. It would be a team that I think a lot of drafters would look at as being riskier because you're, starting Breece Hall and J.K. Dobbins early, and they look like they might not be ready. And yet, if we flipped those players, I would also be very excited about that one. One of the reasons that I think 2022 is a lot of fun is that last year it didn't look like the back third of drafts was going to be that strong, and it turned out to be. This year, there are a lot of fun ways to play it. We mentioned the 5-6. I mean, the 5-6 is really where you have difficult decisions if you're in that back third. Elijah Moore, DK Metcalf, Darnell Mooney. I mean, those guys are good values, and they have a lot of upside. They all fit that situation where and it's not just like the fantasy community. I mean, like everybody thinks that the Jets, the Seahawks, and the Bears passing games are going to be poor. If those teams are merely mediocre, those 3 wide receivers are set up to crush ADP. I think you have to have the guts to draft them at least some if you're stuck with a pick in that area, because those guys just do separate so much. We chose not to here. And then, Ben, before we go, I did also want to mention, I think because of the early tight end and the early QB pick, I wasn't thinking about it exactly properly. I said that we didn't necessarily have wide receiver heavy or 0 RB-ish teams in this draft outside of maybe the 9th. The team in 11 has a really cool start of Devontae Adams, Mark Andrews, Gabe Davis, Amon-Ra, Elijah Moore. Not only is that wide receiver heavy with the elite tight end, but in Devontae Adams, you have maybe the best wide receiver in football, and then you have 3 young guys, so you have explosive upside. You have Justin Herbert. We don't really like that value, but there's no question that Justin Herbert could be a tournament winner for you. Then comes back with, again, maybe not exactly the guys that I would be targeting, but really fun running back profiles in Cordero Patterson, Brian Robinson, who does show up on the 0 RB watch list, Isaiah Pacheco, Darrell Henderson, and then doesn't get scared of where they are at running back and then flips back and takes some more high upside wide receivers. I think the team in 11 may be, I never want to say like our biggest competition, because then things go in a very different direction, but they would be one of the teams I'm putting my money on.
Yeah, and those upside receivers you mentioned after that run of running backs included Joshua Palmer, which was an interesting pick with the Herbert selection. I think one of the paths to Herbert really hitting is if Joshua Palmer does break out. Not a guy that we're typically on, but if he has a really strong step forward type of season, we're betting against it on this team. We took Mike Williams in the 3rd round. We're hoping that Williams is clearly the guy. But if Palmer were to step forward alongside Williams and Keenan Allen, and with Eckler as a good running back receiver, suddenly Herbert's weapons look a lot stronger. So Palmer kind of a key player for Herbert, and I like the idea of stacking him with him, saying if Herbert has a ceiling outcome, maybe he's bringing Palmer along with him, or vice versa. If you really like Palmer, saying Palmer's the guy that unlocks the Herbert top 3 outcome. I think about that. I think about that a lot with QB stacks, where if I get T. Higgins on a team but not Jamar Chase, I'm still, I think, more interested in Burrow, because I think Higgins is really a big one. We think T. Higgins is incredibly good, but like Chase just feels so can't miss at this point. To me, it's if Higgins has that big season that makes him worth a 3rd round pick, then Joe Burrow is going to be a star. He's going to throw for 5,000 plus yards. So sometimes for me, it's that secondary receiver that actually makes sense for the stack, in that the top receiver is already priced pretty high. The second receiver might be the one that unlocks that quarterback upside. It might also be said that I'm thinking for this that they are some of the more vertical receivers, the downfield type play receivers, maybe maybe higher touchdown rates as well associated with that. So like Mike Williams might also fit for Herbert in my mind. I don't think Keenan Allen is a guy that you suddenly need to stack with Herbert if you're taking Keenan Allen. If you take Mike Williams, I think you're probably bumping up Herbert a little bit, because if Williams does really hit, it's probably much bigger for Herbert's stat line than, if Keenan Allen has 120 catches or what have you. Anyway,
and something to think about. Kind of glossing over there, and that was exactly the right way to think about unlocking the QBs. DJ Chark, the player who unlocks Jared Goff for him. I mean, he's going to get to the halfway point of the season, and Jared Goff going to be the QB starter. Then
I joke that all roads lead back to AJ Brown, but for you this year, all roads lead back to Jared Goff somehow.
And you can tell who the better drafter is when one person is on AJ Brown and the other one is Jared Goff.
Yeah, right.
6 of the 12 teams do take a second QB. We do not. It was interesting here because both the Kyler Murray and the Justin Herbert drafters take 2. The Lamar Jackson drafter takes 3. My preference is the guts that we're getting out of the 2 slot, where this drafter is like, I've got Justin Fields, so I'm set.
That's the only QB I need. I like that a lot too. You mentioned a lot of 2 QB builds here, a lot of quarterbacks drafted. One of them was Deshaun Watson for the Kyler Murray drafter. They seem to be interested in holding Watson all year and then having 2 potentially high-end quarterbacks if they make it to the shootout portion. But when that happens, another element of that is that Tua Tagovailoa goes in the final round. You mentioned Marcus Mariota goes undrafted. I don't see Mac Jones here unless he went in the last couple picks. No, he didn't go either. I don't think I see Daniel Jones on this board. So we made a little bit of a stand as well going without Lance, but especially for the Fields drafter, if Fields really has a hard time early, there's going to be options at quarterback. And maybe that's not true in your home league always. And so maybe you do want to draft the backup if you're a home league drafter listening to this. If everyone takes 2 QBs and Daniel Jones and Mac Jones and Tua, none of those guys have any shot to be available to you, even Mariota, and you would have to pick up Matt Ryan or something, maybe I would get it more. Part of the reason I was comfortable not taking Mariota late was that we could, if something does happen where we don't love Lance a couple of weeks into the year because he's really just melted down, like you suggested might be possible, Sean, at the very end of the draft. We could potentially get Mariota. If we don't get Mariota, we could potentially get Mac Jones. We could potentially get Daniel Jones. There are multiple viable quarterbacks, I think, profiles that are worth considering. That drafter who took 2 in the 20th round has Lamar and Derek Carr already. They might carry 3 quarterbacks all year, but we might see Tua get cut, or even Derek Carr get cut if he has a bad couple of first weeks and Tua has a good couple of first weeks. Maybe that drafter says, I can't carry 3 QBs and Derek Carr's the one I got to let go. Again, in leagues where people are willing to take only 1 quarterback like this one, there's going to be viable options if you need to switch off of Lance, but the point applies more to Fields. So I like what that drafter did in the 2 slot, being willing to just gamble on Fields, saying, look, I'm starting Fields at least for a couple weeks. If it doesn't work, I'll figure it out then.